Well, hi there, students. Today we're going to explore silhouette design, how it works, and a variety of different techniques to achieve it. So what is a silhouette? A silhouette is the outside of a form or a mass, and we as designers exploit this in order to achieve a clear read with our design. So how does this work? Well, the brain typically looks at a form, and before it looks at the color, the texture, or the values of that form, it tries to understand what it is by looking at the outside, the silhouette. Looking at these different silhouettes, I'm sure that you can identify who they are in popular fiction based on just looking at the outside alone. We know that this is Shrek, Yoda, and Mickey Mouse. Great attention to detail and thought was put into how they designed these silhouettes. For example, look at Shrek. He's got a small head, tiny little legs, and big, huge arms and a big torso. Let's look at what's called a strong silhouette. So not all silhouettes are equal. Some silhouettes work and some don't. In general, with my students, what I teach is that a strong silhouette has these major characteristics. They have big, middle, and little uses of negative space. That would be anything in this shot that's white. Anything that's black would be positive space. Anything that's white would be a lack of positive space. So that negative space also has to do something. It moves in and out of the entire silhouette. If your space is limited to just the outside of a form and it doesn't really do much but curve around, then it needs to be a little bit more dynamic in order for the brain to find interest in it. Dynamic means to change. Proportions that stand out are a must as well. Just like Shrek, we can tell what this silhouette is all about. It's a bruiser. It's got big wide shoulders, not much emphasis on the legs, and not much emphasis on the head either. When designing, design in threes. Big, middle, and little forms. Big forms would be the things that tell the story. That would be these big clamping limbs. Middle-sized forms would be the general shape of the torso, how the shoulders work. And little forms would be things like pulleys, pistons, hydraulics, and these fun little smokestacks. These silhouettes of these legs just show that they're humanoid limbs. They don't solve any design problems about what kind of style or theme we're shooting for. This one over here would be tight, so I focused on all the tiny little ripples and the type of texture for the boots. This robot leg, I wanted to have a triangular base and a blocky hip, but I kept things a lot looser. Just using a hard edge brush, I moved the brush in different ways that hydraulics may go, and gear boxes and pulleys and such would move, and so we have a lot looser type of a sketch. They both are strong. They both have movement in and out of the silhouette. Silhouettes are clues for the brain. You could take one silhouette and another artist could draw ideas out of that, completely different ideas from other artists as well. What goes on the inside is totally up to your own creativity. Now, when you're making silhouettes as beginners, I would suggest going for basic symmetry. It's the best way to kind of get the main feel for how to actually create them. Though once you're a little bit more experienced with the process, shift to asymmetry. Asymmetry means that things are not the same on both sides. A great beginner method is to build off of a base. Start with a very basic anatomical figure, and you could even duplicate that layer multiple times, and then just draw on top of that. If you're drawing traditionally with paper, draw an anatomical base in black marker, and then using a fresh sheet of paper, overlay on top of it all of your design changes. Move your paper to the side a little bit to make room for another silhouette sketch, and then do another one by overlaying on top of the anatomy. The benefit with this is that it really helps with production. The challenge is that your silhouettes have all the same pose and there's not much dynamic and change in it. This can negatively impact your design evolution. It can restrict your progress. So it's a good idea if you're going to work off of a base to work from multiple bases. But again, that depends on your goals. What if you already have the overall anatomy broken down and your art director or your teacher or your client wants you to explore just multiple variations of that same thing? Well, just like you can see these gauntlets, working off of a base can be very, very helpful in achieving that and doing small variations of the same design. Working in halves. In my class, I call it working in halvesies. A benefit with a computer is that you can work in layers, and this is great for symmetry. What you do is you draw half of the silhouette, you clone the layer and flip it. Then you mash them together and you end up with this kind of out of proportion looking silhouette shape. And then you go over it and take away and add to it. Another method that I really like is I call it cutting and pasting. So what I did is I drew just the top torso of this robot and I cloned the entire top torso, and I cloned a part of the bottom torso. I took that top torso and I rotated over to make it look like this big blob, and I multiplied those individual parts for the bottom of the torso, and that made it look like he's got this serrated or kind of staggered spine type base. And then you just go in, erase, and add, and transform what used to be a torso into a massive gun, or massive smashing arm, or piston apparatus. You add more design to it. I even did the same thing for the limbs. What you want to avoid, though, is try not to make it look like you've got cloned pieces of the individual thing inside of it. Now for an advanced method, positive-negative reversal. Whenever you take two silhouettes and put them into the exact same space, they become one silhouette. For example, this letter G and this string of butterflies. I need to invert to the negative space where those two forms intersect. So if you have a complex form and you want to kind of extract different pieces, just invert to the negative. For this creature right here, I want it to really show off where its sensory apparatuses are, its eyes and its mouth, and so I inverted the negative to suggest that. Where the tentacles connected, I really wanted to kind of figure out, well, do they just grow out of the top of it, or do they wrap around the edges like a sea anemone? And so by inverting the negative, it gives more information in the silhouette. Here, you can even do it for energy. Inside a black silhouette, something that would glow or emit light could be white, and then outside of the silhouette against a white background, just invert it to the black. It's easy to overdo it, but again, remember your restrictions and your client needs. Your client might want to explore tighter variations, but if your goal is to try to find solutions in the early stages, it's very easy to get really snagged and caught up with the minutia, which kind of defeats the purpose of this whole process. And my final method, looking at clouds. Your brain, again, is designed to recognize patterns. So if you don't really know what to make, but you have a good visual library set up, play with just the rough form language and masses that you see in it. You might see something strange happen on the canvas, and when you do, your brain will try to make sense of it. I did that to create this robot. Also, for this turtle slug-like looking creature, I started with some simple tornado strokes and some blobs, and my brain thought, this looks like a head, this looks like a shell, let's roll with that. And I did. Now with silhouettes, you could use value. I'd say this is an advanced technique because it solves problems, but it also could create more if you're not skilled with lighting quite yet. It can also overpower the piece. The benefit to this, though, is that it looks cool, clients like it, and that you can roll this into production based on if the lighting is working with your strategies or not. I could take this silhouette, upscale it, and then start to paint and draw and render right off of it, and that just saved me probably about 20% of the build-up time at the very beginning. Here's an example of how silhouettes can extract information. Again, that's an entirely different lesson, but this is a silhouette of a child mage. And using the design of its staff, I came up with line art from that staff. And then from that, it evolved to, well, what if we had different mages with different roles? This mage, his job would be to reinforce, or this job would be to heal, or debilitate, or amplify the powers of others. And so silhouettes can really open up a fun little door of exploration. You can even explore different costume variations. There's a veil over the top of this child mage's head, but we don't have every solution in place. We've just got the outside areas. So how could we then extract information from that silhouette to try a variety of different crests and crowns and veils and hoods? Now looking at the torso area, this mantle or this sash that's going across, we know that it's fluffy and pokey up here, but what are those? Are they feathers? Are they fur? Are they ornaments? Well, I don't know. Then we could go and explore different variations of feathers, fur, and ornamentation from that one silhouette. Silhouettes don't have to be organic. They can be manufactured things. We call those hard surface drawings. So the way you wiggle your brush suggests that. I wanted a blocky type robotic form, so I wiggled my brush in 90-degree angles in order to achieve that. Here's an example of one type of gun, and here's the example of the exact same gun, slightly altered just to try to achieve a different shape balance or form balance. All I did was lasso this out, copy and paste it here, and make a couple of adjustments. Let's take a look at this gun emplacement right down here. Do you see all the crazy chaos and wires and negative space that's visible here? Well, I used that to create this robot. You will see that exact same negative space in this area under his armpit. I just copied it, rotated it, erased parts, cloned other parts within, and built a robot out of it. That's one of the reasons why computers are very fast and effective at production drawing. I'm creeped out by cave spiders, so I figured why not draw something like that? And these are examples of cave spiders with their knobby long limbs and creepy little nubby knees. And so by picking one of these, we can take this up to a level of production to create an actual production painting. So from the study, we could then go to the actual silhouette that we choose. And so I blew that silhouette up very large. After turning down the opacity, we can then extract what our brain sees for the line work in there. And so from going from silhouette to line art solutions, we can take this and draw and paint and bring it up to a level of production painting that is a finished image. So here would be the creepy cave spider in all of its cringy, knobby nastiness. And this is a fun little painting technique. I call it the quick and dirty method, where you work with line art still in place, but you still add colors and textures and value and such into it. Well, I hope you guys found this helpful. As always, feel free to get in touch if you need any assistance in class, and I look forward to seeing you guys. Take care. Bye-bye.